I'm Ronna Richmond. Today I'm going to show you how to start a still life painting. I have a canvas here that's been toned with burnt umber, and you're going to be able to see me draw it in paint just like I do when I'm starting any other painting. I don't use sketches I go right in on a computer. This is called a study, and I'm going to mix colors and just show you exactly how I would do this painting as a study sitting here in my studio. So let's have a look. I can move that over. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to use burnt umber here. Just going to use burnt umber with a little bit of mineral spirits. Okay, now I have this sketch on here. Now I'm going to use my palette knife. This is how I use my palette knife. Some people, they get confused about how to use a palette knife because we use utensils like spoons and forks where we scoop. We scoop with them like this. A palette knife is not a spoon, it's a knife. So you generally use the bottom of it. Like when you're buttering a piece of bread, you don't flip the knife like this when you're buttering. Well, maybe a few people do, but you just smear you do this. You smear the butter around with your knife. Well, you do the same thing with it on your paints. So I'm going to go in with some red. You're going to see how I use my palette knife. I'm going to do a local color of red on here. And I'll tell you the colors I'm using as I go along. I'm going to go ahead and just pop some red in here so you can see what I do. This is a deeper red. It's a deeper red apple. So I have Cad Red Light, Cad Red, and Cad Red Deep on my palette. Those are always on my palette. And this is kind of, on my palette, this is all the colors, but it's crammed on down into half because I don't have a big enough space here. So I'm doing the best I can. So I'm gonna take some Cad Red Deep and a little bit of, whoops, this is supposed to be over here. There. A little bit of sap green to gray it down. And red and green are complementary colors. So if you mix them together, you're gonna get a grayed down. It's less intense. It's a less intense color than what you started with. Okay? And then I'm also gonna add some little bit of viridian. And I'm not stopping to look at a color wheel. You're just looking at the object. Think about the opposite. You can think about opposite colors on the color wheel, but what you're thinking about is just its complement, which is it's the opposite. I call them best friend colors. And green and red are best friend colors. Blue and orange are best friend colors. They're best friends. Think of them as best friends. Violet and yellow are best friends. They go together like peaches and cream. So I mix them together, red and green. It's going to make the red darker and grayer. And I'm going to just pop this on here. This is local color. Now, you can see how it's bright red. I want it to be a little darker than that. So now I'm going to go over here to my alizarin crimson, and I'm going to mix that together. And you see how I put this in with the alizarin, and then I went over here and I grabbed some more of its best friend color, green. And I can either leave that up there, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to go like that. And then I'm just going to paint in my darker. I'm happy with that. That's more about what my apple is. What I'm seeing on this apple is more of this color. Now, you're gonna see people, I've seen a lot of artists online where there's other things going on. But one of the things I've noticed is that they concentrate on one little spot and they completely resolve part of that painting before they're moving on to other parts of the canvas. And there's a reason for that. I'm not going to get into that here, but you should be working all over the canvas because all the colors are working together on the canvas. They all affect each other, and all the colors in the spectrum here in the still life are all influencing each other. They're all influencing each other with their own color. So if you're just painting this and then you completely finish this apple and you've done nothing else, then your painting is not going to look as unified and alive because you weren't painting it all at the same time. And so if you see people doing that, it's because they're looking at different stages of a drawing on a computer in an app. And so they're not being holistic painters. And as a result, their paintings, even though they may look complete, there's something lacking to them. And that's partly what it is. It's not completely, but that's partly what it is. So now I've got my local color here. And that's a topic for another show. Okay, now I'm going to look at the local color of my plate, which is kind of a cream color. It's basically white. So I'm going to go in. The other thing that's really important that I need to mention is toning your canvas. And this will also unify the painting because you have a uniform color on the background before you even begin. Another thing is that some of these paintings I've noticed, they lack immediacy. And the reason is because they go in and they try to draw with pencil, and that's another story too. A lot of them are drawing, they're projecting pencil drawings onto their canvas, and so they're just basically, there was one artist I heard say he felt bogged down because he felt like he was working on a big coloring page, because by the time he got his drawing up there, he was just coloring in the shapes. And so he didn't feel like he was really drawing. And he wasn't really drawing, he was tracing. And so then he felt like he was just filling in colors. And so he really I think he stopped doing that because or at least to the extent he was, because he didn't feel fulfilled by these, doing these paintings anymore the way he was doing them. And I can understand that, because that would drive me insane. Anyway, so now I'm going to go ahead and do my background and my plate. And my background in this case, it was going to be this white wall, so I'm just going to, and there's a white wall back here, so I'm going to just use that as my background. And this will also it'll allow you to see, this is a white plate, but it's going to be a different color white, so to speak, than the white wall. So for the plate, I'm going to use a little burnt umber, because this is it's kind of beige-ish. It's cream color, so it's not a bright white. And I'm using titanium white here, which is a very, very bright opaque white. And here I've mixed a little bit of my apple colors here, my mixed up dark red and then my medium red. And then I have to warm it up. So this is more of a cool white, and this is a warm white. What I mean is warm, I'm talking about warm like the sun. Think of temperatures. Well, you'll hear the term color temperature, but really if you think about being cold or warm, if you're hot or you're cold, that you can also think of that in terms of your colors, your cold colors and your warm colors. And the warm colors make you, think about temperature outside. They make you feel warm when you look at them. And then your cool colors are like water and cold air and ice and greenery. It can be cool because it's a cool color too. So that's how I think of these colors. So I'm looking at this, and it looks, compared to this wall, which to me looks like a blue white, it is a cool white. And then this white of the plate is a warm white. And so your colors will pull back and forth between cool and warm as you mix your colors. All right, so I'm gonna finish mixing this. I need to add a little bit of yellow. And this is bright right here. So I want to add a brighter yellow, not as opposed to this over here is yellow ochre. Now it's got a bunch of other paint in it, but yellow ochre is over here with basically with earth tones. And so I don't want to add that because that has some gray, that's more grayed down. So I'm going to go with I have cadmium lemon, cadmium yellow, cadmium lemon, cadmium yellow light, and cadmium yellow. I'm going to add a little cadmium yellow light, just a little touch. You see that? I don't add too much, just a little. You can always add more. And see how I'm mixing it, how I'm mixing with the bottom. I'm not doing this. That's exhausting, doing this back and forth like this. This is not a spoon. We're not scooping it. We're just buttering the bread, So I'm going to add a little bit more. Okay, and a little bit more. And I'm going to add a little more of a warmer, my cad yellow, to warm this up. Okay, now I'm not even sure if this is going to be the right, but it's a warm, rich, whitish. So now I'm going to go in here. I did do you can see my shadow right here. I'm not going to paint into the shadow. I'm just going to paint around here. And I'm going to just look at my shapes this shape here ends about like this. Now, I've already done another video where I did a still life where you saw the whole still life. You can look at the whole thing. But I started with my underpainting already painted, so you didn't see that part of it. But I do it the same way. I just go in there, and now I'm gonna add, I'm looking at this tone. Now this got a little brown because, well, it's got wet paint, it's wet brown paint. I would normally let this dry and then come back in, but for this little video, I'm just gonna work with it. So now I'm going in with my brighter yellow here because the light's coming from this direction. Whoops, I just painted into my own, I just painted into a little bit into my shadow. Okay. And then on the other side, it's bright too. Okay. All right. I'm leaving these, my little lines right here. I like leaving them so I can kind of see where this inner ring of my plate is. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and paint my shadow. This is gonna be in the shadow, if the light is yellow, it's tend to be yellow, it's warm. And so best friend colors, the best friend color of yellow is violet. Now I can see violet, but there's also the red of the apple is casting its own color, red, into the shadow. And then there are all the other colors of the spectrum I can see in the shadow. So I'm gonna mix up a shadow color. So here we have violet is the best friend of yellow, and I have yellow, so I have violet. And I still have the yellow of the plate, but I'm not gonna worry about that. I'm gonna just do my shadow. I'll use a little bit of the yellow in it, but it's gonna be it's more the complement. So here's some of my, I don't really like store-bought purple out of the tube. I picked up a little bit, but I'm gonna just try to use it here. And I'm using ultramarine blue. So I've got dioxazine violet and ultramarine blue, and then that's gonna be a really potent purple. So I'll put a little bit, I said there was green. I'm gonna put cool green. I put a little warm and cool green because there's a little bit of warm green, I think, in this apple too. And so I'm gonna mix that in. And this is gonna be, I'm gonna move this over because it's gonna be way too much purple because of this purple is so strong. All right, then I'm gonna put a little more of my warm green because that's what I feel like putting. Okay, and then I'm gonna put a little alizarin crimson because I see now in my shadow that of the color I'm mixing, it needs a little more of the red of the apple. And then I'm going to just thin this out a little bit so I can see it better. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of the white of the plate. Okay. I'm gonna add a little more blue. Now you can kind of see where it was red violet. I added a tiny bit more blue because I felt like it was a little too violet. I needed a little more blue. So that's where you just decide, you make a decision as the artist, how exactly do you want that shadow to look? So I'm using the complement of yellow, which is violet. I'm using the complement of red, which is green. And then I also put some blue in there because there's blue and violet in that shadow. At least in my picture there is. And I see green and other colors too. Then there's also, within the shadow, you have, I see yellow in the shadow. So you try to think in terms of your spectrum and think of your best friend colors. I'm gonna go ahead and do the wall. I'll put a little blue on there. So I threw a little warm blue in there because I just felt like it. And then I thought, well, I need a little more, I need it to be a little bit cooler. So I just cooled it off with a little alizarin, I cooled it off with a little ultramarine. This is a little bit, it's light. I'm gonna darken it a tiny bit. Gray it down. I'm graying it down a little bit with ultramarine blue. Look at that. See that? Ultramarine blue and a little burnt umber just to gray it down a little bit so it's not quite so stark. So here I had my white and then I added ultramarine blue and a little bit of burnt umber, and it's going to look a little more gray. That's what I want. From here, I will let this dry. I would normally let this dry and then come in and do another coat, another layer, if you will. But when I come back to do, if I come back to do this at a different time, I would start mixing my other tones that are gonna model the form of my apple. So then if I wanted to do, I'd look at the apple. Let me just wipe this back a little bit so you can see what I'm doing here. Now, I would go in and start model. I would squint at it, and then I would start in with a different brush. I would say this one, something like this, something a little bit softer. And then I would start mixing. I'm using more of this red and mixing red, and I would try to put in where I see brighter areas of red. So you put it up there. If it's not red enough, when you're looking at this bright light, it's gonna get lighter and warmer. Your colors, whatever your local color is gonna be, it's gonna be brighter and warmer. So I'm looking at it from here. So from where I'm at, it's like this. So my brighter red is going to have more yellow in it. And then I just dab it like that. I'm just going to dab at it. And don't always go in one direction. So you want to kind of, it's round. And so you want to round that apple and make it look more round. So you go in both directions, up and down the apple and go around the apple. Now I'm going to mix a little bit lighter area, or redder areas. Medium tones. Now this is really wet right now, so some of my colors are mixing more than I would like them to. I've got the shadow side of my apple right here. This is going to be where there's more dark to the apple. And I'm going to mix up some of this sap green, which is the best friend color, with my red. And then I want to throw in a little bit of this violet that I put on here on this side. And see how that starts? It's got a ways to go, but it starts showing form. And this is not a show on painting an apple. It is just showing you how you start the painting and how you start picking and mixing your colors. And you do it by looking. You just do it by looking. And then you go from there. Now, let's say I've got more of this done here. Let me try putting a little bit more of the So I'm using some Viridian. It's a cool green, because it is going to be in the shadow. I see green in the shadow. The object is red. So you're going to see more green in your shadow. And so I've got some violet in there already, and I've got red violet. Now I threw in some cool green. I got warm green. And when I paint, a lot of times I just use my brush like this. Instead of trying to paint like this, you're kind of limiting yourself. If I want to do something really tiny like that, I'll use my brush this way. But normally when I'm painting, it's a lot. Your brush strokes are a lot looser. You're not forced. You're not writing something on a piece of paper. So you use the brush more loosely that way if you use it where you hold it overhand. And then you don't tend to get too nitpicky with your brush strokes that way. Okay, now I'm just going to show you, I've got some, you definitely need to look at all your deeper tones and your middle tones and then your highlights. Okay, so I'll just pop in a few highlights to give you an idea of what I'm doing with that. So my highlights are going to be really bright. They are going to have a lot of white in them because that's the lightest you can get. So I'm looking at this from where I'm at here. And there is basically, there's some here. I'm gonna make that a little bit whiter. That. And then there's, in this little indentation there. And then I'm gonna add a tiny bit of, I see a little blue in this one over on this side. Well, it's cooler, so I'll put that there. Okay, so that the light is coming from this way. You know, this is, I know, this probably shouldn't be, it's there because I have a light behind me shining on the back of my head, but I'm gonna go ahead and cover that. Okay, so now I'm gonna add a little bit of white to my red to kind of give it some middle tones. And see how that lightens up the surface a little bit in certain spots. So it's, because there's a bunch of different tones. Then I also see, even on this side, I see a reflection. So I'm gonna go in with some of my lighter color. I'm gonna put some blue in that dot. And I also see some green. And I'm going to add some yellow because I want to lighten that green up a little bit. And I'm going to add a tiny bit of blue because I just see some blue in there. And at the base of you need to look carefully. You can see little reflected light even on the shadow side at the base of your object. And so that helps define the object. Now, the other thing I want to talk about are cools and warms. These are all kind of warm, but I'm going to put some touches of pink in that. And this is where I don't actually see pink in it right now, but I'm going to pop some pink in there because I see some pinks, but they're not, they're not as obvious. Okay, so here I just added some pinks. And then at the top here, I'm gonna just add a little bit of, and I see a little reflected blue up here. And back here. Okay, so this is just to give you an idea about how to start a painting. And by looking at your colors, you don't need to look at a color wheel in order to paint what you see. But it's important for you to mix your colors and mix them thinking about cools and warms, light and dark, and then relationships of colors. look at the temperature of colors, and paint your whole painting. Don't get so caught up in just painting one spot. I think that would help everybody be a better painter if they didn't just paint one spot, because it kind of. So I'm going to put, before I finish, I'm going to put my little stem in here so when I go back to work on it, my little stem is already there. And my stem is just a little gray. It's a little gray yellow. The stem is like right here. And I'm going to put the, whoops, that's too white. I need more yellow. It's a little bit lighter. And I see a little bit warmer here. And it's a little dark. So this one, I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow ochre to, because it's, well, that's kind of what it looks like. A little orange. And then I put a little dark spot up here. And then I'm gonna have to put some, let's see. You can't really see the inside of this very well. I need a smaller brush. Try this one. Need some dark red. Now, this painting is not finished, but for this episode on how to start a painting, it's finished for our intents and purposes. That's how I start my paintings, my still life paintings, and then I can go back on a different day and work on it more until it's completely finished. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode of my painting channel, and hopefully you've learned gotten a few tips or learned a few things about mixing color and starting on a still life painting. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.